All right, tonight's brief Hannity history lesson. The current DOJ rules governing the report's release. By the way, the Attorney General has full control. He decides, nobody else. But they were widely backed by the Democrats. Remember, 2 decades ago after the Starr report was released, and what the Democrats wanted was designed to make the special counsel more accountable to the public. How ironic, the same people that wanted to limit the release following Starr's findings are now pushing to get the full report. No redactions. And Democratic stunts like this don't stop there, as they're now taking steps towards, get this, issuing subpoenas for Mueller's report. And, by the way, they want grand jury interviews and material, which would be illegal last time I checked. Joining us for the very latest, House Freedom Caucus Chairman Mark Meadows, the author of an introductory explainer to the Mueller report. Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz is back with us. All right, let me start with you, Professor. Last time I checked, releasing, oh, somebody's calling for one of you, releasing grand jury materials. Oh, that would be Professor Dershowitz. Hello, this is Sean Hannity. Professor Dershowitz's line. Can I help you? Before releasing grand jury, it's illegal, correct? And redactions for sources and methods and maybe people who are innocent in all of this, whose names are mentioned, that would be normal, although Barr doesn't have to reveal a thing, does he?
No, there's nothing in the regulations that require him to reveal anything, and the best test is the shoe on the other foot test. When we go back to Comey's statement, if Comey had said, we're just not going to indict Hillary Clinton on the emails, and the Republicans said, wait a minute, we heard you have a report that says she was extremely careless, we want you to release that, the Democrats would have jumped up and down and say, no, 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 prosecutors don't say anything negative about people they haven't indicted. All they're supposed to do is announce no indictment. Well, suddenly everything has changed, and it's the Democrats who want to know why there wasn't charges. They want to know what the split was between those who wanted a charge and not charge an obstruction of justice. The law doesn't authorize that to be released. If the Attorney General wants to do it, that's within his discretion. But no court should order the Attorney General in the executive branch to release grand jury material and other material to the legislative branch, certainly without the approval of the court. So we're seeing rampant hypocrisy, and we see it on both sides. If the shoe were on the other foot, I think we'd see Republicans calling for the release of material of the Democrats.
Yeah. And, you know, yeah. I would agree with Trey Gowdy. I don't think they should release any of it, Congressman Meadows. It was definitive on collusion. If collusion is not a crime, and you know, okay, so the Attorney General and even Rod Rosenstein agreed in very quick order, not based on any principle that whether or not or argument that you can indict a sitting president. On the merits, they said, no, this doesn't rise to any level of indictment. But grand jury materials, eliminating executive privilege, sources, methods, innocent people. Frankly, the Democrats said we shouldn't do it. I think maybe they're right in this case. Let's give them what they wanted.
Well, you know, it's amazing what a little bit of good news for President Trump will do to my Democrat colleagues. You have Adam Schiff, Chairman Schiff, who, as you pointed out, was saying, no, we can't release anything that's classified. We can't afford to put our national security in jeopardy. But yet here he says, I don't care what's in there, release it all. You got Jerry Nadler, who's switched and flip-flopped and said now he's going to subpoena this, even grand jury material. Listen, both sides look at this differently. But I can tell you right now, this is all about a narrative that the Democrats have had for 22 months that went away, that because their lies were not borne out in the Mueller report. And now what they're trying to do is change the narrative and pick and choose little parts so that they can go after the president once again.
Congressman, there are going to be criminal referrals issued this week by Chairman Nunes. There are going to be, the president I interviewed last week, there will be the FISA applications released. There will be 302s released. There will be Gang of 8 material. We've identified 5 buckets of information that will be extraordinarily damning. I know that to be the case based on all of my sources. Is that a good idea? Because I think you want transparency. I don't think they're going to like that when that comes out.
Well, they're not going to like that, Sean, but I think you've got the professor on tonight. It's all about civil liberties and making sure those civil liberties are protected. And if we cannot count on our government to protect those precious rights to privacy without, warrants and warrantless searches, then we've got a real problem. And so some of those criminal referrals are justified. Certainly some of the declassification that gets to the bottom of this is justified. At the same time, we do need to protect our national security interests.
100%, and sources of methods. You know, Professor, let me ask you, though, I want to ask you this. They're going to call back now to re-interview. Many people, they don't make a lot of money. A good attorney in Washington, I'm imagining, is close to $1,000 an hour. What, for the same questions? For how many times must people be harassed like this? And why don't they just say, I plead the fifth, I stand by my prior testimony?
Well, they shouldn't plead the fifth because that, for many people, implies guilt. Remember that when the House Un-American Activities Committee and the Senate did that back in the McCarthy period, the courts finally put an end to it and said enough's enough. You can't just harass people and call people in order to expose them. You have to have a legitimate legislative purpose.
What if they misremember something from testimony a year and a half ago? They decide if it's perjury or lying to Congress.
There's no question. Perjury traps can be fallen into by innocent people. If an innocent person testifies truthfully and somebody else testifies the other way, and if prosecutors choose to believe the other person, you've fallen into a perjury trap, which is why the president was right not to testify to Mueller.
100%.
And why I think civil libertarians ought to be very concerned about exposing to criticism one-sided report which only saw one side of the story and didn't result in indictments. That's traditionally not done, and at least the courts have to be asked to come in and decide what can be shown and what can't that come from grand juries. Let's have the same civil liberties
maybe
for
Democrats
everybody.
might want to give up on the same investigation they had. The FBI investigation, 2 congressional investigations, no collusion, no obstruction. Give it up. Maybe solve problems and serve the people that put you there. Just an idea. Thank you both.
Hey, I'm in favor of that.
President Trump drawing plenty of media criticism for moving yet again to abolish Obamacare, with journalists arguing and quoting unnamed Republicans as saying that he has no health care plan after 3 failed attempts to repeal and replace the program that he and his party ran against. I spoke earlier from L.A. with Ben Shapiro, editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire, syndicated radio host, and author of the new #1 New York Times bestseller, The Right Side of History, How Reason and Moral Purpose Made the West Great. Ben Shapiro, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
The pundits are nearly unanimous in saying that President Trump, it's bad politics for him to again bring up getting rid of Obamacare. He was riding high after the Mueller report, after 3 failed attempts to get it repealed through the Republican Congress. Are the pundits wrong?
No, I actually don't think they are. I think that the president suggesting that there's a plan in the wings is obviously not the case. I've spoken to legislators in the Senate, in the House. There's no plan that is forthcoming. The only thing that might be true here is that President Trump is planning essentially for the Supreme Court to uphold its former statements on Obamacare, uphold Obamacare, and then he can blame the Democrats in Congress for blocking any sort of reform of Obamacare, make them own the status quo, as well as the possibility of Medicare for all. That could be a clever political strategy.
Right, but he is, of course, backing a lawsuit that would get rid of Obamacare, pre-existing conditions at all, without any plan in place, as you just noted.
Right, and that again, may be his lawyers betting that the Supreme Court, which still has the same constituency, John Roberts, in the swing vote position, will vote the same way they did before, and then Trump can say, listen, I did the best that I could to get rid of Obamacare. I even sided with a lawsuit to get rid of Obamacare, and the Supreme Court wouldn't let me do it. That's actually not a terrible argument to the base.
All right, blame it on John Roberts. In a review of your book, The Economist called you the pop idol to the alt-right, catering to hyperventilating conservatives. The other day, the British magazine retracted that description and apologized. What happened?
Well, I mean, I think there are a lot of people who don't actually know what the alt-right is. I'll attribute to arrogance rather than malice and ignorance. A bunch of folks on the left seem to think that everybody who is conservative is quote-unquote alt-right. The alt-right actually has an ideology. It is a white supremacist ideology that suggests that Western civilization is predicated not on eternal immutable principles, but is based solely on race. And Western civilization is just about white people. Oddly enough, there are folks on the left who seem to think the same thing, but the alt-right believes that what makes Western civilization great is that it is a civilization about white people. That obviously is false. It is also stupid. I've been a longtime critic of the alt-right. I was the #1 recipient of their hate in 2016. I still have to hire security thanks to hatred from the alt-right. So the Economist labeling me some sort of pop icon of the alt-right was obviously wrong on its face, and that's why the Economist did the right thing, pulled down the headline. They then called me a radical conservative, which is strange because I don't know what would make me particularly radical. Are there any non-radical conservatives in the opinion of the Economist? But I guess I'm a radical conservative. I can take. Alt-right was not a thing that I was going to allow to stand.
Yeah, you did push back, and you got the apology. From your book, you say, we are angry at each other. The anger is palpable. Where did it come from? So my question is, you're an aggressive player in the partisan wars. Does cable news, do the media contribute to and fuel this anger?
I mean, I do think that obviously strong political conversation is going to lead to polarization, but the question is that you can have strong political conversations where you disagree and you discuss and still love the person you're arguing with at the end of the day if you feel that you have the same shared goals, if you feel that you have the same common base from which you are working. What seems to have happened is that the sort of polarized battle we're seeing on cable news, I think, is a reflection of a deeper underlying unease with the fact that we don't have all that much in common anymore. The book really is an attempt to remind us that we have a lot in common. We have a 3,000-year developmental history in Western civilization, and that right, left, and center, we all still should agree on certain basic principles: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, a government that is not empowered to invade our lives. These are concepts that we should all agree on. If we can't agree on those, then the arguments that we're having right now actually carry an enormous amount of weight, and maybe we should be angry.
So you see yourself as sort of slamming other people's policy ideas or views of ideology and civilization, but not demonizing them. Is that the distinction here?
Absolutely. I mean, I hope that I don't always succeed, but I certainly hope that I'm attacking people's ideas and not them as human beings, or suggesting that they lack moral fiber, moral character because we disagree on tax rates.
Right. Now, when you went to speak at Berkeley, famously, protesters showed up. They shouted, "Speech is violence," which is an interesting twist of meaning. You also say that despite the fact that you're an Orthodox Jew, you're routinely castigated as a Nazi. Where does that come from? And just personally, how hurtful is that to you?
Well, I mean, obviously, on a personal level, it is deeply discomforting. It is not a nice thing to be labeled a progenitor of the worst mass murder in history against people who shared a religion with me. That's obviously ridiculous and silly and evil, frankly. But the general, the general polarization. We live in an era where it is very convenient to tear down your political opposition by labeling them morally insufficient, that they have a lack of character. And that is a sign not only of bad politics, but bad underlying motivation. If you're slandering somebody's motivations without knowing the person, knowing their motivations, if the idea is that they are innately bad because we disagree on political matters that we've disagreed on for years and years and years, but that my politics reflect white supremacy because we disagree on affirmative action, for example, then you're not engaging in politics. You're engaging in, effectively, character assassination and a certain form of tribal warfare.
And there's way too much of that in the online sewer that some social media channels have become. I would agree with that. Ben Shapiro, congratulations on the book. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.